We're going to go on to our Nico's second talk. In the second talk, I gave the title, The Joy of Giving. And one of the things about my brother and Sue, his wife, is that they've been blessed in life in many ways, and they've used their blessings to bless others, to share others. So my brother and Sue are both very generous stewards of the church, philanthropists, givers of different things. And I wanted to talk about just this topic on giving. So,
It's on, it's recording.
I always, the first topic's always easier. This was supposed to be George's topic. And he backed out, so I tried to put something together. I know you've been listening so attentively. Thank you for the nice comments after my first talk. George says we've been blessed with a lot. We have been. I just want to point out, remember I said I was picking on my wife about marriage, not really picking on her. I was pointing out about marriage. But she's been blessed with 7 layers of hair, and Luke and I with no layers. If we could have 1 layer of her hair, we'd be set for life.
I'll take one too. I'll take a layer for mine.
Take a layer too.
And a layer of her kindness.
But I was afraid Sue might offer a rebuttal. So I do want to say in my poetry book, I always tease her and I said, Sue, I really liked how you behaved the last couple of days. I'm going to extend your contract 5 years. So in return, when I wrote this elaborate book with all these poems, I had to write a poem on her, To My Love. So I had this picture of her, and she went through 27 pictures until she found the perfect picture. but I'm not a sensitive guy, as you probably can gather. I'm not overly sensitive or romantic, but I wrote To My Love. Life is, it's the shortest poem in the book. Life is fleeting, your love is fair, life is exhilarating without a care. To be there with you, you are a dove in flight, a beautiful sensation to behold, a memorable dark night. You are passion and the light. So she extended it and signed the contract for 5 more years. But I'm here now to talk to you about a more difficult topic. Luke asked me to talk about the joy of giving. Listen, I know many of you in this room, Luke has told me how grateful he is for how generous you have been with his ministry in this church. And I know many of you in this room have contributed large sums of money, and more importantly, have given your time and talents to make this church so beautiful. And it is beautiful. I can't believe the expansion you did. And the icons in the main church are gorgeous. When he pointed out St. Patrick today, that was an incredible icon, and I congratulate all of you for that. I've been a personal injury lawyer all my life for 30-some years, but in the early years I defended doctors, like I said, doing medical malpractice defense. And listen, when you work in Philly against these lawyers, Philadelphia is sort of a little bit like Boston or LA or Miami. When you go into the big cities, these lawyers are sharks. And they're tough, they're intelligent, they're aggressive, they know what they're doing. Many of them some have values, many don't have values. You encounter unethical lawyers all the time. And one of the earliest cases I had was, I was right out of school, and we were defending this very humble Chinese-American doctor. And he happened to be sued for a low back surgery, a fusion. And this rough man from South Philly, I think he was of Italian descent, he claimed to be totally disabled after this surgery. Well, in fact, we had surveillance of this man, lifting car seats, working very physical work for his brother-in-law, getting paid under the table. Now in Lancaster, if we had presented that evidence, the jury would have given him 0 and would have taken 1 minute. But in Philadelphia, you have to understand, you have many people on welfare on the jury, and the lawyers like that because these people don't have a conception of money. Many of you worked hard all your life, have good work ethic. You guys know the value of money. Well, these juries don't. So after we showed this surveillance, we thought it was a slam dunk. He lied directly to the jury, they'd get nothing. Well, the jury, this is 1989, one of my first trials, the jury came back in 20 minutes and awarded $1.9 million. And my job as a young lawyer was carry the bags, do all the writing, and after the trial, go talk to the jurors and find out what went wrong. And when I spoke to these black jurors, many of them which were black, I realized the evidence had nothing to do with anything. They said to me, yeah, I said, how could you award him that money? He lied to you. He was doing all this heavy-duty work after the surgery. And they said, yeah, but, you know, to tell you the truth, we know he lied, but we didn't like that Chinese doctor. And it dawned on me, I learned a valuable lesson as a young lawyer. A trial is not about the truth. A trial involves people with their prejudices, their preconceived notions. And you know, we all witnessed that in the O.J. Simpson case. I mean, here was O.J. Simpson. He was a famous athlete. He had a lot of money. And even though he did probably kill those two people, he had a lot of money and a lot of clever lawyers who turned the whole system around and basically put the LA police on trial. And the African Americans on that jury, they bought it wholly and acquitted a guilty man. So one thing about law is there's a lot of things that aren't right. And it's a system made up of humans, and it's very flawed. And, you know, what I did was, after those trials in Philly, I came back to Lancaster with my wife because I wanted to practice in a more sane environment. And I started representing the real people who were injured. I represented, one of my first cases, a crane fell on a guy, 26-year-old kid, and his foot was crushed and they amputated his foot. And we learned that the reason the crane fell was that the foreman knew the cable was fraying, but because he was so much under pressure to finish the job, he took a chance, and this young man lost his foot for the rest of his life. And I represented a woman who was 36 years old with 3 kids. She couldn't breathe. She went to her doctor 3 times in 5 days, and he kept saying, Holly, it's just a little bronchitis. But she said, doctor, I can't breathe. I think we should get a chest x-ray. He said, I'm telling you, I've been your doctor for 20 years. It's just bronchitis. The next day, she died of pneumococcal pneumonia, leaving 3 young kids. So I've had the opportunity to represent a lot of legitimate people who just had misfortune in life. Now, why do I tell you this? I only tell you this because I've been in a business, a money business, where unfortunately greed and excess can create a lot of temptations for lawyers. And let me tell you, neither side has a monopoly on justice. The insurance companies cheat, the insurance companies try to take advantage of people, and there are many lawyers who try to take advantage of insurance companies. So there's good and bad both ways. I'm going to give you one tip, and then I'm going to get off law. Those of you who have a car, how many drive? Those of you drive. If you have a car in Massachusetts, make sure on your car insurance you have high levels of underinsurance. Most people don't know what underinsurance is until it's too late. But you know that people in this state, just like in Pennsylvania, can drive a brand new car and carry only $20,000 in insurance. And if those kids are texting, or they're drunk, or they cause a serious accident where someone's paralyzed or killed, and especially if it's a young kid, the insurance company is going to pay you $20,000 no matter how good your lawyer is. That's where you and your family need underinsurance. If you carry good levels of underinsurance on your policy, I carry $500,000 times my 5 vehicles, so $2.5 million. So if I'm killed by a drunk driver and that person only has $20,000, we can get $20,000, and then I can sue my own company for $2.5 million more. So that's a very valuable tip. Most people don't know what underinsurance is. And I know there have been people in this church who've had terrible accidents and didn't know the importance of insurance. So I just tell you that as a tip. Since I'm a lawyer, I thought I'd give you a free you know, law is a challenge, but, you know, my success in law has given me a comfortable life. You know, I have a beautiful wife and family. We live comfortably, and you know, I'm very grateful for that. But let's face it, the more important battle is the battle we face every day, the spiritual battle of our souls. And, you know, it's not about how much wealth or living a comfortable life. Remember what it says in the Bible. To whom much is given, much is expected. That scares me, because I've been given more than my fair share. through my profession, through my career. Luke's a priest. He works very hard. He's a great priest, an exceptional priest. My dad is too. Priests don't make high income. But lawyers like me, if I have a big case, I make a lot of money. And that puts a lot of pressure on me because am I going to be the kind of person to just hoard the money, save it, use it for myself and just my family, or am I going to share it? So when Luke says he's been generous, that's not a big compliment because to whom much is given, much is expected. So if God blesses me with more and extra, more is expected of me. That's why, I'm stewardship chairman, and some people will say to me, you know what? You are a lawyer who makes a lot of money. You're a personal injury lawyer. You should give a lot. Why should I give a lot? And I'm saying, you're missing the point of stewardship. You shouldn't give what I give. You should give in accordance to how God has blessed you in your life. You know how He's blessed you. I don't want you to compare your giving to my giving, or the doctor, or a successful businessman, or a priest. We all know deep inside our heart. We all know what we give and what we want to give. We all know how generous we are. Give according to how God has blessed you. Every day, this spiritual battle involves the forces of good and evil, right and wrong, moderation and excess. It's tough living in America. It's the greatest country in the history of the world. We're living in the most wealthy country in the history of civilization. And yet, how many people in our society are unhappy, don't have peace of mind, are anxious? I told you, my wife, I forget, did I say this in the first talk about your Bible study group? And that after all the women are on Lexapro or Xanax? Yeah, my wife says to me, one day she says, you know what? All these lovely women in my Bible study, we discuss all these worldly problems and spiritual problems. They're all anxious or stressed. They're all on Lexapro or Xanax. And I thought to myself, that's the story of America. We have so much material wealth, and yet so many of us are restless, unhappy, anxious. I think about the excess. Think about advertising. Advertising kills me. I'm the first to admit. I told you I have a vice. I'm seduced by exotic and fancy cars. My dad is a priest. My father grew up very modest. We grew up modest. My dad was a priest in the 60s. I remember back then, priests made $6,000 a year. And my mom bought us cheap sneakers, she bought us cheap clothes, and my dad drove a Ford Falcon with no air. And we all fought for the window seats on vacation. There were 5 kids, we were all fighting for the seats. And then one day in the 70s, my dad came home, and he never could care less about material things. He said, I'm going to buy a new car. And we kids got all excited, a new car, wow. He said, a Honda Accord. Now, a Honda Accord back in the 70s it's still a nice car, but it was a really nice car back then. If you had a Honda Accord, you were middle class or upper middle class. So we kids got all excited because my dad never bought anything. So he researches for 6 weeks, and all of a sudden, one day he says, I'm getting the car, we're all excited, and he drives home in his brand new Plymouth Horizon. And I said to myself, what is that? He said, it's a Plymouth Horizon. I said, Dad, you're going to get a Honda Accord. It's a much better car. He goes, I thought it would be a little too fancy. People at the church might think I'm driving a fancy car. And I thought to myself, he's a good man, but I said, what the heck is he doing? But, you look at the excess in this country. How about when you go into a supermarket? When I go into a supermarket, or when I go into one of these department stores, I feel guilty. You know why I feel guilty? Because it's crazy. We have too many choices. Everywhere there's choices. And I feel, this isn't right. I'm living in a country where I can choose between 27 varieties of crackers, or, you go into a Bonton or a Boscov's or one of these department stores, and you bump into all this clothes. And it's crazy. And, this excess and advertising always leads us to be unhappy. We're always looking at, I like cars and watches. So I'm always looking at pictures of cars and watches, and I get all these car magazines, and then I have a perfectly new car, nice car, BMW, Porsche, nice cars, and I need to have the newest and the latest model because I'm sucked in by advertising. So that's one of my vices. When the President of the United States, does anybody know what the President of the United States makes? $400,000 a year. And I'm a Philadelphia Eagle and Sixer fan. The Philadelphia 76ers signed a guard last year, 33 years old. All he does is shoot. He makes $23 million a year to shoot the ball. When the President of the United States, with all his issues, makes $400,000. And I think college coaches are making $4 or $5 million at these top Division I schools. The college president makes $800,000. The college coach makes $4 or $5 million. And how about our excess in eating? You know, one of the best books, and how about our children? Our children aren't satisfied. And I see Paul looking at his iPhone again. This is directed towards him. Our children are not satisfied. You know, excelling in sports and doing your best. Paul was a good basketball player in high school. He did his best. He excelled. But his team didn't always win. In fact, they came up one winter and guaranteed me they were going to the finals, and the first game they lost, they got knocked out. And I said, Paul, that's good for you. It teaches you humility. You're not always going to win, but you played well. But don't tell me you're going to win and win the championship. Because in this country, winning is everything. Being number one is everything. I mean, we don't care about if Paul, excelled, used his talent to the best, but we tease him because he lost. That's not the way it should be. And on top of it, we not only want to win, we want to humiliate the losers. We want to humiliate the opponent after we win. You know, one of the best books I ever read, did anyone ever read the book, Living a Balanced Life? Father Anthony Cañeras. He's a priest at our seminary, and I see one presbyter read the book. That's good. But it's a book I would recommend to everybody. It's a 100-page book, and we got a copy. It's a 100-page book, and it says, living a balanced life in an imbalanced world. I mean, he talks about, that's the cause of all our problems. We all see people. We have people who work all the time. He says we need a balance between our work, our play and our leisure time, our worship, the church and our faith, and our love life. But where we run into trouble as human beings is we become obsessed with one area. We all know people who work so hard. They work 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day. They kill themselves. They want to make more and more money, Yet they neglect their love life. They neglect their families. They neglect their play. They don't go on vacation, enjoy themselves. They neglect their church. And yet they think they're balanced men living a great life. They're living a miserable life because they're excelling, they're workaholics, excelling in one area of their life. And we all know people like that. And some of us may be people like that. He says we need vacations, we need downtime, we need to energize ourselves. But then you have people who they spend all their time on video games, vacations, entertainment, going to sports, watching sports, going to games. That's all their life's about. They don't care about work or their families or whatever. And he also says we need to worship. We need to have a higher being in our life. Because without that higher being, without the church, we're never content. We can have all the fancy cars, the fancy watches, the beautiful homes, but if we don't have peace of mind, we're not happy. And we all know that in life. There was a dying old man once, he told the priest, Father, I've made a lot of money in my life, millions, and I'm going to leave something to the church. He didn't say how much, but I'm going to leave something to the church. But I'll tell you, Father, I'm a good man, but I've been too busy to come to church all my life. And the old priest said, you know, at your age, God has given you 4,200 Sundays to go to church. Get to know Him, to feed your soul, to be cleansed, and to prepare you for this day where you have a chance to seek eternal life. And he said, you've had all the time in the world, and yet you spent it all on one thing, the pursuit of money. And then finally, Father Canary says, we all need love in life. We all know people who say, I'm my own man, I don't care what anybody thinks, I don't care what anybody says, I like who I am. And usually the people saying that don't like who they are, but they try to convince you they're happy people. Let me tell you, we all care about what other people think. I don't care if you're highly educated or you have no education at all. Relationships is what it's all about. We care about what other people think. We care about what our families think. I care about what my wife thinks most of the time. I care about what my kids think. I mean, so we cannot live in an island. And if we do live in an island, we become lonely. One of my poems on loneliness, I think people who are lonely have some of the most pain of any person out there. And that's why you can find these people in nursing homes. You can find them everywhere in society. But loneliness is one of the worst things. It's worse than physical pain in some ways. You know, as adults, we live based on our own insecurities, our selfish desires. We want to attain. And, you know, Mick Jagger, does anybody know who Mick Jagger is? Mick Jagger, for those of us 50 and up, Mick Jagger is the head, I think he's still singing, he's very old, but he's still singing. He's the main singer for the Rolling Stones. And do you remember Mick Jagger, one of his big hits was, I can't get no satisfaction. And I try and I try and I try, but I can't get no satisfaction. And I always thought about Mick Jagger, because I'm thinking, what do you mean you can't get no satisfaction? You have the most beautiful women in the world. You have more wealth than you'll ever dream about. He had beautiful children. He had fame. He had fortune. People adulated him. And yet he's writing his main hit, he can't get no satisfaction. Because in Mick Jagger's life, he had no peace of mind. He probably didn't have a developed spiritual life. He didn't have a church of people like you to surround himself with. And all his life was based on money, fame, and fortune. I say this to Paul, who's finally put his iPhone down. You know, my son and Paul are in their 20s. They're all about beauty. They're all about sexy women. They're all about gold chains. My son says, isn't this a cool watch? He sends me a watch that I thought some rapper was wearing out of the hood. He says, isn't this a cool watch? It's like this big gold. And I said, well, it's not really my style to make you wear. You know, these young people seek to emulate these rappers and these hip-hoppers and their lyrics, and I'm not going to repeat their lyrics or I'll be saying something inappropriate again. But these people, it's all an illusion. And these people go through, they have houses like kings, and they have these exotic cars, and yet in the end, many of them are broke, unhappy, bitter. They have lives without substance. So I'm asking Paul and my nieces and nephews, do not emulate these rappers. That's not where it's at. Now, those of us who have lived long enough, I don't mean to be critical of making money because I make money. It's not money that's bad, it's the love of money. We all know we all want money. We all want financial security. We all want to pay our bills. We all want to educate our children. We all want to have a little money for savings so we can live comfortable retirement. But the odd thing about life is, and you see this all the time, I know some very, very wealthy people, lawyers, doctors, businessmen. Some of the most miserable people I know, because the studies have shown that the amount of extra money, when you're extremely wealthy, once you meet all your financial obligations, extra money does not ensure happiness or peace of mind. And the studies have shown that. You know, I watched that. Has anybody ever watched Shark Tank on television?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shark Tank is very interesting because, this is my daughter, by the way. She's using her talents in a beautiful way. And this was, sorry, I didn't give you enough focus on my daughter. And these are just, she had a class of 28 African American girls, and she's making more of an impact in her world than I will ever make in any case. Because these girls all look up to her. They would all go home and live with her because they come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And she makes them feel so good that they live fulfilling lives that 1 year they're with her. And many of them leave saying, we want to come home with you and stay with you forever. And that's a wonderful thing, to have a career like that, and to know that you're in the right place in your life. And she's done that for 4 years in a school in West Philadelphia, where all these kids come from the ghetto. And this is the point I was trying to make. The amount of extra money doesn't determine how happy you are once you can meet all your financial obligations. Now, why am I showing you that? That's some of my cards. I'm showing you that because I'm doing this for Paul. Paul, I'm saying this for you because I've had all these nice cars: Porsches, BMWs, Aston Martins, everything. And I'm just telling you this now so you can save yourself a lot of money. It hasn't brought me any more happiness than when I was young and had your body and I could run and play basketball 5 hours a day. A nice car is fun for 2 weeks, but then after a month it's just a car. There's a guy in Lancaster, he's a friend of my friend. My friend's the lawyer for him. This guy's a commercial realtor. He's sick. And the reason I say he's sick, he buys 50 cars, sometimes 5 Rolls Royces a year. He never drives them. His whole being is about making money. He's probably worth $300 million in Lancaster. And he keeps buying all these cars. And my friend the lawyer will never drive them. I said, "You ever drive?" He goes, "Drive them? This man doesn't even drive them." You know what he's done? He's built this big warehouse called Blackthorn Cars. And he stacks them all on 3 stories. He just buys them, puts them in a warehouse, and every now and then he'll go stare at them. Or he'll take his friends to look at them. But no one can drive them. He never drives them. And if he gets one ding, he trades it. If someone hits the car or just bumps it, he trades it. Now, why am I telling you about this man? Because he's a lost soul. I once asked him, one of my friends asked him actually, his name is Richard. He said, "Richard, where do you want to be? You're worth all this money, but what are you doing with your life? You're buying cars." He once bragged to me at a party, "I bought more Rolls Royces this year than any sheik in Saudi Arabia." Like that's going to impress me. Certainly not going to impress Luke and my dad. And so we asked this guy, where do you see it all at? All the wealth God has blessed you with. What are you going to do with it? What good are you going to do with it? And you know what his answer was? It was very sad. "I see myself, I'm just going to save it." He has no kids, by the way. "I'm just going to save it, and I want to make more money, and I want to die on the phone making the biggest deal of my life and the biggest money I ever made, and then I want to fall over as a heart attack and die." That was his answer. Now, there's a man, I don't know how you respond to something like that, but here's a man who could make a difference in Lancaster, who could mentor kids, who could build things instead of building. You know, it reminds me of the biblical story, we all know it. How about when Jesus said, I'm not a priest, so I want to make sure I get this one. When Jesus said, I have it somewhere. I'm almost done, don't worry. These are just my notes. But Jesus,
He said there was a man.
no, he said, yeah, go ahead, you tell me that.
There was a man who did so well, and he said, "What am I going to do, oh my soul?" And he said, "I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger barns so that I can store all my stuff. And then I'm going to say, oh, soul, look how well you've done. Just eat, drink, relax, enjoy life." And then Jesus called him a fool.
He said, "You're a fool. This very night your life will be taken from you. And where were all the things you've stored?" And, you know, that man was in the Bible, so of course he was storing his crops. This man is doing the identical thing in the modern world. He's just storing these obscene cars.
And the great line that he said was, "What will it do to profit? What will it do to win the whole world and lose your soul?"
And he also said that same verse, "Take care and be on guard for all types of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Let me ask you, and now I just want to ask you, and maybe anyone can answer this question, what brings you joy in your life? Just name a few things. Health. Certainly health is up there, probably number one. For many of us. What else?
Grandchildren.
Children and grandchildren, and not only children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews who don't look at their iPhones and respect you. What else? And I think that's, let me skip the friends here.
Being in church.
That's right. And, to me, finding a loving partner is certainly up there. Health, raising our children, having the job to be able to pay our bills, and, just to have a few real trusted friends in life. But to me, at the top of the list, certainly one of the most important things is using your money, your resources, your time, and your talents to help someone else, to help the church, to promote the faith, to promote missions. Certainly that's up there. In my world of money and greed and fighting lawsuits all the time, the one gospel phrase I'll never forget: what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but to lose his soul? And whenever I'm doing a case, if I ever have that temptation to exaggerate an injury, hide a piece of evidence, hide an important witness not revealed to the other side, I always think of that line and I say to myself, is it going to be worth making a little extra money and perhaps jeopardizing my soul? And that helps me make the right decision usually. So I'm going to let me ask you this too. People, when we will spend as Albanians and Greeks and Romanians and ethnic people, we love our families and our children. And we don't spare any expense on that. We give them everything they need, from education to nice clothes. Some of us buy cars for our kids, whatever we can afford. We never spare an expense. Yet, sometimes, and we go on lavish vacations to Aruba, to Greece. Some of us travel to Greece or Albania, well, not Albania so much, but Greece and other exotic islands. And yet, sometimes, as stewardship chairman person, I'm always stunned when I say to one of my friends who lives a lavish lifestyle, would you be willing to give a little more to the church this year to be a good steward? To give 25, 35 a week, if you can afford it 50 or 100 a week. And to some people, it's an easy ask. But to other people, they become defensive and they get angry at me or the church. Or they rationalize and say the church is faltering in this or that area. And yet, I can tell you from experience, not only mine, but watching my brother Luke and my dad, my mom, and all those who are good stewards in life. They have joyful lives. My dad has wealthy brothers, and they're not good stewards. They're not givers. And yet, they're miserable in old age. They're wondering, where did their fame and fortune, they still have their fortune, but their fame is gone. And yet I look at someone like my father. My father was our example, of course. He's joyful. He's 86. He's not afraid of death. Because he's not afraid of death because he's always shared everything he's had. So if he dies today, none of us will mourn his loss, but we will be joyful for the life he led. We're never going to regret that he held back or was not generous with what he should be generous. And I think you people know this, but I'll say it anyway. When you've given something generously to someone, when you've given to this church, when you've contributed, it's a good feeling inside. I think you get as much from it as the church gets. And think about this. Whatever you give now, God is storing up later for you. It's a reward down the road. So we should never hold back on the church. Not only give, when there's a building fund, but be willing to give on a yearly basis, because think about all the blessings God gives us on a daily basis. You know, one of my favorite things to do, try this sometimes, some of you may do this. When I'm in a minute market and I see someone pumping gas, if it's a rundown car, their kid's crying in the back, and the person looks like she's had a rough life, I love to walk up there and say, you know, let me put my credit card in and pay for your gas. And people are stunned. They're absolutely stunned because they're total strangers. But you know what? I walk away feeling way better than she walks away with a full tank of gas. I feel good the whole day. And to me, it doesn't faze me. But to her, she remembers that, and I remember that, and makes me feel good. You can do that anywhere. I like to do that in the supermarket sometimes if you see someone. Or if someone on the street, you know, we all have the people on the street. Some of them are mentally ill, some of them are down and out, but if you take the time to listen to their story, if they ask you for $1, say God bless you, give them $10, give them $20. It's just a great feeling to see how they react. These are ways we can make a difference on a daily basis. I was in Charleston last week, or 2 weeks ago, for a legal seminar, and Sue and I were staying in this elaborate, beautiful hotel, and we were eating lavish meals. And I went down in the lobby, and I don't like to shine my shoes, and there's this old little black man shining shoes. So he shined my shoes, and he was the most gentle man, and I was asking him questions, and he was telling me about his life and how he's worked since he was 8 years old, and he really had a compelling story. And you know, I listened to him, and then finally we started talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, and he says, I'm originally from Philly. So of course that enhanced his image in my eyes. So we were talking. So afterwards I said to him, and I'm not saying this to brag, I'm simply saying this because we can all do this. I said, how much was it? He says, $12. I said, thank you, sir, but I really enjoyed meeting you. And I gave him a $50 tip. Now, he looked at me like stunned, like, it's only $12. I go, I know, but your story was worth more than that. And you know, he walked away, and I walked away with a great feeling, and he walked away with a great feeling. And these are little things we can all do on a daily basis. We can all give an extra 5 or 10 or whatever. And like I said, I'm not comparing myself to anybody. There are people out there like my father. My father would take missionaries in every holiday. Luke had his own room. George and I shared a room. That's difficult in itself.
But you have to say,
show Felix.
no, wait a minute.
Remember the Odd Couple? George was not neat, I was neat. George was smelly, I was always clean. I read books, George never read books. I finally put a line down in the room and told him he could not pass that line. So what did he do? He farts. So he put his arm. When George comes, this is George. He always was able to psych me out. And he's a kid funny guy, so when he comes and talks to you, you're going to love it. Ask him about that. But the point
Cross the line, right?
now I forgot my point. Yeah, my dad would always take missionaries in, so once the room was fumigated, they would take over the room, and these missionaries come, and my dad would bring in the blackest missionaries from Uganda and Kenya, and we were little boys. All we knew is when these black guys came, we were out, and we would go out of the room, we'd be in the basement or somewhere, staying, and these guys were so black that I remember when I was 6, my mom, a bishop came from the Ugandan church, and he was black as black. And I never saw a guy that black. And I said, so I snuck in the shower because he didn't lock the door. And he discovered me. And my mom says, what are you doing? I just said, I wanted to see if it was that black all over. What the point I'm trying to make is my dad gave, he brought an Albanian boy in who was a little mentally ill. And my parents didn't hesitate to let him live with them. For 6 months, he couldn't speak a word of English, and we've helped this. These are the kind of parents I had. My dad, he had no nice clothes, except what the kids brought him for Christmas. We buy him a high-quality shirt. We pool our resources. So what does he do? The first missionary that comes, he's leaving the house wearing my dad's finest shirt. This is the kind of father we had, and that's the reason, I think, he didn't give us much in the way of material wealth, but he gave us so much of spiritual wealth, and that's why we feel the way we feel. And you know, the irony is, you all see this in life. If you grew up with parents who are miserly, who hoard, usually you tend to follow that model. But some people, when you grow up with generous parents, you tend to be generous. But I'm here to tell you today, I don't care how your parents were. You know deep down, if you believe in the gospel, the way to be is generous. And as an adult, we have to answer to ourselves. We can't blame all our problems on my parents like I try to do. But, so anyway, I'm going to conclude, but I want you to, well, yeah, I'm not right. So I'm going to conclude and say, as stewardship chairperson, some of the most generous people in our church are not the wealthiest. And I'm going to give you, we have a retired teacher. He gives $5,200 a year, $100. And I know this because I'm stewardship chairman. You don't know who he is, so I can say this. But he gives $100 a week. And he's a retired, honest teacher living in a little ranch house. And when I say to him, Jim, you are a great example of a good steward. You really, he goes, Nico, this is a small portion of what God has blessed me. He has 5 kids. He has a beautiful family. He said, this is nothing. To be able to give God that money now, it makes me so happy. And obviously, he's a man of spirit and example. We have another guy in our church. He works for Federal Express. He's a blue-collar guy. He gives $10,000 a year to our church. And he works a blue-collar job packing. And when he and his wife, when I say to them, your generosity amazes me, they'll say, well, they're like surprised, like, well, we're giving back a portion of what he's blessed us with. And they're truly an inspiration to me. For me to give $10,000 is not nothing. But for a man like that to give $10,000, he's really doing it from his heart. And I'm going to say this just because she's here, Doris Stathis. Here's a woman who doesn't have a lot of money, but she gives of her heart. She's a woman who all her life for our church has given through her talent, baking, cooking, you know, helping people, always being there. Now she's doing some of that for your church. She's an example of a steward as strong as any steward we've ever had in our church. And so I don't want you to leave here thinking it's all about the money, because it's not. If you don't have the money, you can be the most generous steward through your time and talents.
She gave up her daughter, too.
Now when she gave up her daughter, let me tell you the truth on that. Luke became a priest. He was a math major, and he partied hard in college. He wasn't always as good as you. When he graduated from the seminary, he was looking for a wife. And my dad was more in love with faith than Luke. My dad always said, one of my 3 sons has to marry Faith Stathis. It didn't matter that we had girlfriends. Faith Stathis. So Luke played hard to get her originally. But then we had a conference with Luke, and we said, are you nuts? She's the most beautiful girl physically and inside who will ever travel to Africa and Albania with you for 12 years. So he found the perfect person for him, and she's obviously complimented his ministry in this church.
Why did you have that conference?
So, I want to leave you with 2 questions, and these are the questions I tell everybody in my church when I approach stewardship. Stewardship's not easy. People don't like to talk about money. So what I say is, someday we will all face the Lord, and we will be alone when we face the Lord on Judgment Day. And if we are true believers, we need to ask 2 questions. 1, does my giving, and I'm talking about time, talents, and money, does my giving throughout the year really reflect how God has blessed me and my family? And only you can answer that. No one answers that for you. And question number 2, if I died this year, would I be confident to face God and say to him, Lord, I used the money, the time, and the talents, the years you gave me, not just for my own family and my own comforts, but to honor you and your church and help those who are less fortunate. And I say to you, if you can answer yes to both of these questions, you're on your road to a good life and salvation. If your answer is no, then I think we need to reevaluate where we are. St. Basil the Great said, If you guard and hoard your wealth, it will not be yours. But if you share your wealth, you will never lose it. Reminding us, of course, that what we give away in this lifetime will be ours forever. Thank you for coming.
We'll end in 2 minutes. I don't know if there's any, does anyone have any questions they want to ask Nico? Or any comment that you need to say?
There's my parents. You know, I'm a lawyer. I got them talking so much, I forgot my pictures.
Oh, what a
This is what, every holiday, we had at least one missionary. This is your priest. He didn't have much, we didn't think he had much potential back then, but he's really good. This man was the lawyer. This is George. This is my mom. That's as stylish as she'll ever be. And this was the daughter my dad adopted. Her mother was a prostitute, and her dad died with 7 kids.
Wow.
And we took a vote. I was 6 years old. My dad came home one day and he said, we're going to bring another child into the family, but I'm a Democratic guy. We're going to take a vote. So I was the oldest. I voted no because I was the oldest. I didn't want another child older than me. Luke was like 2. He voted yes because he didn't know what he was doing. And everyone voted yes. So she came the next day and she was 8 years old. I was 6. My brother George was 5. Rebecca was 4. Luke was 2 or something. And I don't know why his vote counted, but it did. And she came in and she was very bossy because she had raised her brothers and sisters basically while her mom was working in her profession. And we raised her and she turned into a good person. She's a nurse today and has 2 children who graduated. One's a veterinarian, one's a teacher. So her mom would never let our family adopt her, but she obviously didn't look like the rest of us. She's 4'11", and the rest of us are over 6. And but that's another thing my dad did in his life to save another person.
So, any questions, any comments, anything? We're going to thank Nico, and again, you'll be able to read his book. Thank you for that gift of the book. Thank you for your time, Sue. Thank you for coming here.
And I'm going to come out with another book in the next year probably. But if you ever want more copies, you can go on Amazon.com or BarnesandNobles.com. Just put Musings of a Preacher's Son in the book. And any book you buy, I'm not promoting it for sale, but any book you buy goes to charity for my brother and my dad. I'm not looking for money for this book, it's just for fun. And if I don't sell any, these are my kids die, they can read it.
Thank you very much.